Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And I'm back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for Monday Matters. And Jen, we're recording this in September. It's going to come out in October, which is always so weird to be there. So I can't ask you what the future self of you is like, but I can certainly ask you like how the current self of you is like. I think I was telling you, I was thinking about you over the weekend because we got to see our niece, Caroline, who's a freshman in high school. Actually, she may be a sophomore this year. She's riding horses, English saddle, and she won all these awards when we were there, and it was so beautiful and contagious, and it made me think about you and your family because you have a rider.
Yes, I do. I have a rider. She's she's a hunt seat rider, and I was telling you earlier, it's a lifestyle. It becomes what you do. And you had said to me, Will, that you thought you could sit there all day and watch. And I said, yeah, that's what I do. It's a long summer season. It's exhausting, but we're shifting into the winter season, which horse people will know what IEA is. It's when we don't haul the horse. We ride other people's horses. So yeah, good times. Horses they're magical. They really are.
They are. They're so beautiful and so magical. This week, as we're stepping into Monday Matters, we'd like to bring just conversations you and I have been having or current things we're reading or writing about. And I was actually writing about this several months ago, and so I wanted to pull it out today to talk about random moments and major outcomes. And so let me set the stage. Mm-hmm. I was listening to a podcast called Hidden Brain that is hosted by Shankar Vedantam, and he was talking to a political scientist named Brian Klaus, and they were telling this story that just caught my attention about a man who, while swimming in Greece, was swept away out to sea, couldn't swim back because of the tides that were pushing him out into the ocean, and so he was out there. Night was coming. He realized I'm going to die because I can't just swim forever. And suddenly this beach ball comes floating by, and it's partly deflated, but it's still inflated enough. He's able to wrap his arms around it and hold on to this thing until he's eventually rescued. And so when this became public, the news wanted to talk to him, and so they published his story. And this mom who lives in Greece is watching TV when she suddenly looks at the beach ball, looks at her son, and she's like, wait a second. I remember that because several days before, she and her son had been down at the beach, and he was playing around with this beach ball, and he kicked it really hard, and it went out in the water, and they couldn't get it back, and it floated away. And, of course, he was sad. But that was...
He was probably mad.
Yeah. But that was actually 80 miles away from the place that this man was rescued. And so as I was listening to this, I was struck by two ideas that I wanted to bring here. The first one, this political scientist who studies like human behavior and the way that people respond in societies, he was saying, one is this: we are very good at predicting outcomes when it comes to data, trends, seasons, experiences. And that's where we spend a lot of time as educators looking at those things. He said, but two, we're very bad at predicting outcomes when we fail to take into account random, unknown, unseen forces involved. And so, of course, Will's light bulb just went off because I just started thinking about how many times in our work do we try to hold on to all the things that we can control or predict, but sometimes we don't take into effect all of those random, unknown, unseen things that are going to equally affect outcomes. So I'll sit there for a moment, Jen, because I have lots of other thoughts, but I just wanted to start the conversation there for yours.
Well, I'm glad you talked about both of these, number one and number two, because knowing that we can't predict outcomes when we fail to take into account those random forces, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the work, build the systems, as you and I talk about all the time, to ensure that we have the best outcome possible. But it's true. There is so much beyond our control, and we don't know even what the things beyond our control really are. We love a good spreadsheet. We love a good, RIT score. We love those things, but a lot of other forces are involved. I just this morning, Will, I went to see a dear friend of mine whose husband passed away over the weekend. They'd been married 54 years, and oh boy, she had the plans. She knew he was sick. She knew that when he got to a certain point, she was going to call hospice. He was going to go to a place where he would, have a certain last few weeks. Well, that's not at all what happened. One afternoon, she looked over at him and she said, I knew. And she held him as he passed. It was not the plan. It was not at all the plan. As a matter of fact, he was very verbal that he didn't like the plan. And so, that made her wonder a lot about those random unknown and unseen forces. And so my point there, it's not always about death. It can be about the students in our care, the families for which our students are connected, what happens with those families. The beach ball floated 80 miles because of something, and it saved a life for some reason. And that 10-year-old boy who probably got a little talking to for kicking his ball too hard, those are the things that shake up all the odds.
Thank you for saying that, and I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend's husband. The one of the takeaways that I remembered from this analysis of what we can control, what we can't, was something else that Brian Clough said, which was one of the only ways that we can actually prepare ourselves for those dual realities is by building our own resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, Jen, we've been doing this a long time.
Right.
Because I remember back in COVID when we were shifting, and you and I started inviting a lot of people in to just, let's talk, free conversations. Let's just problem solve. And then the shift began to happen back to all kinds of partial reopenings and full reopenings. And I remember just agonizing over the load of responsibility that leaders were carrying and schools were managing. And one day you just said in one of our conversations, Will, we can do hard things. Mm-hmm. We can do hard things. And you weren't trying to be insensitive.
Right.
What you were saying is, we have the resilience, and our students have the capacity to do hard things too. And so if we have to hold on to that reality too, in the midst of what can be controlled and what cannot.
Right. It's so bizarre, speaking of random forces, that you brought that up today, because a colleague of mine yesterday, we have one-to-one meetings every week, and she is going through a very hard time with her health. She's going to be okay, but she leads another team. She leads a team of principals, and she said the other day, she said to them, she was very vulnerable and open about her journey, and she said, I love the phrase, we can do hard things. And she said, but sometimes I don't know that I can. I don't know. And she said, so now I'm going to say, don't let the hard days get you down. And she had made little stickers that she gave to all the principals. And so, it is totally normal to be overwhelmed. It's normal to say, I thought I was controlling this situation, and look, it spun out of control. It's okay to say, right now in this moment, I don't think I can do this hard thing. In the end, you will. We can do hard things, and we will. But when those hard days come, I think it's nice to switch to a mindset of, I'm not letting this get me down. I have been given more than I can handle in this micro moment in time, but it's not going to get me down, because I'm coming back tomorrow.
Yeah. I want to come back to that image in just a minute of that random beach ball. But
right.
Before I do, I want to actually bring in another image. And I'm a podcast listener. A lot of times when I'm working out, it's when I'm listening. So this was actually this morning. I was listening to Rick Steves' travel show, because I purposely was like, I just need something that's not stressful. Let me just listen to a travel show. And he was talking to this man, an adventurer named Dan Richards, who loves to travel at night, and he's got some really great stuff. But he was talking about a moment where he was on a ferry at sea that got caught in a storm. And he had been on this same ferry before on a really peaceful voyage and had really admired the captain and crew's ability to sail. But he said that this one was so bad that there were like 200 people on board that were down below, running into walls and falling over things and throwing up. And he'd made it up to the deck so he could hold on to something and watch the crew. And he was like telling the host, Rick Steves, these guys were like sea legs, positioned, focused. They were doing the same thing that they were doing before when they were sailing on that nice little easy cruise, because they knew what to do in moments of difficulty and crisis to just keep on pushing through and get them safely where they needed to go. And so I think about that, Jen, because when we think about those things that we can predict, the outcomes, the trends, the seasons, the experiences, some of those do involve times where we have to plan for crisis or plan for difficulties. Some of them can be random, but this is the word I've heard you use too, that equanimity that we can practice when we're stepping into those situations can sometimes be the glue that holds us together.
Right. Right. I've told this story before, so forgive me, listeners, but my friend that day that the walkie squawked, and we need you right now. We need you in 137. We need you now. And he gathered his walkie and his keys and he wandered down. He said, if I walk in there all crazed, I'm going to make it worse. So that's where, I think we also can rely on our training. We've all been trained very well. And, those folks steering the ship, they'd been trained. They knew what to do. They knew who had a role. And that resilience, like you have talked about, when we look at our behaviors from the perspective of what we know to do, the values we hold, and what kind of traits we need to bring to that moment, then the fear of that uncontrollable stuff really does dissipate.
Well, let me see if I can kind of steer us towards an ending as we wrap up a Monday Matters conversation. And this is kind of where I wanted to be able to end this conversation is to come back to that floating ball.
Right.
Those random events sometimes, what you think is an insignificant incident can sometimes be a hidden force.
Yep.
I'm just going to say it this way. When we fail to take into account the random hidden forces involved in our lives and work, then we may be failing to be aware of the impact our own actions are actually having down the road.
Right.
And so again, not to beat us up and try to be perfectionists, but I just want to say as an encouragement to leaders, every day you are involved in actions and conversations and interactions with people that are sometimes the effects are completely unseen, but can be so powerful.
Right.
And I was reminded of this. I think I put the story in my first book, Principle Matters, but an old friend of mine, Jim Wingo, and by old, Jim's 90 years old. So he would say himself that he's old. He's told me this story more than once, but I love to hear it every time, that when he was a high school senior, he just graduated, lived in a small town out in New Mexico. He was working at a butcher shop in town when he looked up and the door was opening and in was walking his agriculture science teacher. And he told Jim that the civil service was doing exams at the school that day, and anyone that could pass it could get a scholarship for a full ride into civil engineering school. And it was part of a military scholarship. And so he takes Jim by the arm, and Jim's like, when he tells me the story, he's like, well, I'm like, I have blood on me. He's like, takes me by the arm, walks me down to the school, sets me at a desk and says, take this test. And he said, and that test changed my life. Because that moment was the trajectory for him to become to have a career as a nuclear scientist, to become a colonel in the U.S. Army, to become the mayor of his city, all these things. And now his son, who's my age, is my medical doctor.
Oh, wow.
And so, and goes to our church and is a good friend. And Jen, I wanted to bring it full circle because, and I'm just going to talk straight to leaders. There are situations that you're going to be confronting today with kids or with teachers, and you may not think you're making a difference. You may not think that what you're saying or the heart that you're pouring into someone's situation or the solutions you're trying to help them find are making any kind of difference. And you may never see what difference they're making. But it may be that random little beach ball that's floating down the ocean that somebody's going to reach out and wrap their arms around someday. And they may not even know you're the one to thank. So I hope that's helpful, but I just wanted to go there today.
No, and I'm so glad you did, because what you titled this conversation was Random Moments, Major Outcomes. And I think I'm glad you shared these thoughts with me. I'm going to go home and tell my family about the beach ball tonight. I think it's something we can all keep in mind for sure.
Well, Jen, thank you for the opportunity to just talk and be together. And Principal Matters listeners, if you want to check out our resources, you can find this post and sign up for our weekly newsletter that comes out on Wednesdays at williamdparker.com. And Jen, how can they sign up for yours?
Yep. They can find me at my website, jenschwanke.com, and sign up there.
All right, friends, until next time, thanks for doing what matters. We'll talk to you again soon.